The knock came just after sunset, sharp enough to cut through the quiet of the neighborhood. Emily Harper looked up from her kitchen table, heart jumping for reasons she couldn't explain. In her calm Seattle suburb, surprises were rare. This one felt different. When she opened the door, her nephew Daniel stood there with rain on his jacket and something heavier in his eyes. He hadn't planned to come. That much was clear. Daniel was 24 tall, usually confident, the kind of young man who smiled even when life pressed hard. Tonight, his smile was gone. He stood like someone waiting for permission to breathe. "Can I come in, Aunt Emily?" he asked. She stepped aside without a word. The smell of rain followed him inside. They hadn't seen each other in months. Daniel had moved north to Vancouver for a new job, chasing distance from a breakup that had hollowed him out. Their calls had grown short, his voice careful. Emily noticed these things, but never forced questions. She believed people spoke when ready. They sat in the living room, the same place Daniel used to sprawl as a teenager, playing games and laughing too loud. Tonight, he sat upright, hands folded, eyes on the floor. Emily poured coffee, though neither touched it. Silence stretched. It wasn't awkward. It was loaded. "I don't know how to start," Daniel said finally. Emily waited. She had learned long ago that rushing words out of someone only made them retreat. "I met someone," he said, "and I think I'm about to ruin it." Emily studied him. He wasn't panicked. He was scared in a deeper way, the kind that comes when something matters too much. "Her name is Sophie," Daniel continued. "She's different. Not loud. Not dramatic. She listens like every word costs something." He spoke fast now, like the words had been trapped too long. They met at a community art program. Sophie volunteered with kids on weekends. She liked early mornings, quiet coffee shops, long walks near the water. She laughed softly, like she wasn't used to being heard, and she carried a past she didn't talk about. "She's been hurt," Daniel said. "Badly, and I don't want to be another reason she closes up." Emily nodded. She recognized that fear. Love didn't always announce itself with excitement. Sometimes it arrived as responsibility. "I care about her," Daniel said. "But every time I try to say how I feel, I freeze. I don't want to push. I don't want to scare her away." He looked up then, eyes searching Emily's face. "I don't trust myself with this." The words landed heavy. Asking for help like this wasn't weakness. It was risk. Emily leaned back, memories stirring. Years ago, she had sat on a similar couch, afraid to speak the truth of her own heart. She remembered how silence had cost her more than rejection ever could. "What do you want from me?" she asked softly. Daniel hesitated. The rain tapped harder against the windows, filling the room with sound, like time urging him forward. "I want you to help me say it right," he said. "Not in a way that traps her. In a way that lets her choose." Emily felt the weight of the request settle in her chest. This wasn't about love stories or romantic speeches. This was about timing, honesty, and respect. It was about guiding someone through a moment that could shape their future. She studied Daniel's face. He wasn't asking her to fix things. He was asking her to stand with him while he faced the truth. "I don't want to mess this up," he added. "I don't want to lose her because I was afraid." Emily stood and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights reflected on wet pavement, turning the road into a ribbon of gold. She thought about how love had changed over time. When she was younger, she believed love meant holding tight. Now she knew it also meant knowing when to let go. "Tell me everything," she said. Daniel did. He spoke of the night Sophie shared just enough of her past to make him understand why she guarded her heart. He spoke of moments where she leaned closer, then pulled away. Of texts she answered late. Of smiles that lingered. Of silence that scared him more than words. "I don't want to be another almost," he said. "I want to be honest, even if it hurts." Emily listened without interrupting. This wasn't a story about romance alone. It was about courage. When Daniel finished, the room felt lighter, like a storm had passed through. "You're not asking for advice," Emily said. "You're asking for permission." Daniel frowned. "Permission. To be honest, she said, to risk losing her instead of losing yourself. He swallowed hard. Emily sat across from him again. She thought about the responsibility in saying yes. Words could heal, but they could also wound. Still, silence was its own kind of damage. I won't help you chase her, she said, and I won't help you convince her. Daniel nodded slowly. But I will help you speak the truth kindly, she continued. With no expectations. He let out a breath he'd been holding all evening. That's all I want, he said. Emily felt something shift inside her. Helping Daniel wasn't reopening old wounds. It was using what life had taught her. That night, Daniel stayed on the couch. Emily lay awake in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the strange ways love connects people across time. She wasn't part of his story the way Sophie was, but she was part of the moment that could change it. In the early hours of the morning, she made her decision. By sunrise, the rain had stopped. Over breakfast, Emily spoke clearly. Yes, she said. I'll help you. Daniel looked up, hope flickering across his face. But there's one rule, she added. You don't speak to win her heart. You speak to respect it. Daniel nodded. He understood. They spent the day talking, not rehearsing speeches, not planning perfect lines. Emily helped Daniel strip his feelings down to something simple and true. No pressure. No promises. Just honesty. Tell her what she means to you, Emily said, and tell her you'll accept whatever answer she gives. Daniel wrote. Then erased. Then wrote again. Each word mattered. As evening came, he packed his bag. Vancouver waited. So did Sophie. At the door he paused. Thank you, he said quietly, for saying yes. Emily smiled. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't loving someone, she said. It's letting them decide. Daniel nodded and stepped into the fading light. Emily watched his car disappear down the street. She didn't know how the story would end. But she knew this part mattered. Some wishes don't ask for miracles. They ask for courage. And that night, Emily hoped saying yes would be enough to change everything that came next. The first time Daniel heard Sophie's voice answer his call, his chest tightened like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. He hadn't expected her to pick up so soon, and for a moment he wondered if he had made a mistake by reaching out. But she spoke softly, like she had been waiting for him to finally show up. Emily had warned him not to push, not to chase, not to beg. He had promised himself he wouldn't. Still, the sound of her voice made his mind race with every possibility, good and bad. He sat in his car outside a small coffee shop in Vancouver, rain tapping the windshield, and listened as Sophie asked him to come in and talk. When he stepped inside, he saw her sitting at a table near the window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup, eyes guarded but curious. Daniel's heart was beating fast, but he forced himself to stay calm. He didn't want to scare her away with intensity. He just wanted to be honest. They talked about small things first. Work, the weather, how the city felt different now that the rain had started again. Sophie's voice was quiet but steady, and Daniel noticed that she didn't seem to be rushing away from him. That alone felt like progress. When he finally told her he had something important to say, she didn't interrupt. She nodded as if she had expected this moment, and that made Daniel even more nervous. He had rehearsed his words with Emily, trying to keep them simple and real. But now that he was here, he felt the old fear rising, the one that always made him freeze at the moment that mattered. He took a breath and began. I care about you, he said, voice low. More than I expected to. I've been trying to keep it to myself because I didn't want to pressure you. But I can't pretend I don't feel this. Sophie listened without speaking, and Daniel continued, feeling like every word was being measured. I know you've been hurt before. I know you don't trust easily. I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know the truth. He watched her face closely, searching for a sign that he had crossed a line. But Sophie only looked at him calmly, like she was trying to decide whether she could trust him with her answer. Then she said the words Daniel had feared and hoped for at the same time. I need time. It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't a yes either. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Time felt like a slow sentence. But Emily had warned him this might happen. She had told him the truth might not be accepted right away. She had told him that love sometimes needed patience more than passion. So Daniel didn't argue. He didn't try to convince her. He simply nodded and said, "I understand. I'll wait." The relief he felt after hearing her words was strange. He didn't know if it was relief or fear, but it was something. He left the coffee shop with a mix of emotions, feeling both hopeful and uncertain. Over the next few weeks, Daniel tried to stay normal. He went to work, met friends, and kept his life moving. But everything felt different. Every message from Sophie made his heart jump. Every time his phone rang, he wondered if it was her. He didn't want to appear desperate, so he kept his distance, but he also couldn't stop thinking about her. He didn't want to push her, but he also didn't want to lose her to silence. Emily checked on him often, and each time she reminded him to stay patient and respectful. "Love doesn't need to be rushed," she told him. "It needs to be real." One night, Daniel received a text from Sophie that made his hands shake. It was simple, just a few words. "Can we talk?" He stared at the screen for a long time before answering. When he finally replied, his message was calm and respectful, like he had practiced. "Yes, whenever you're ready." He waited, not wanting to appear eager, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. They met again at a quiet park near the waterfront. Sophie arrived wearing a simple coat, her hair tied back, her eyes still guarded. Daniel sat down beside her on a bench, feeling the cold air on his face. He could tell she had been thinking a lot. She didn't look at him right away. She stared at the water like she was trying to decide if she was brave enough to speak. Finally, she turned to him. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "and I've been thinking about what I'm afraid of." Daniel listened carefully, his heart pounding. Sophie continued, "I'm afraid I'll trust someone and then lose them. I'm afraid I'll get close and then be hurt again." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. He knew this fear well. He had seen it in her eyes from the beginning. He wanted to tell her that he wasn't going anywhere, but he didn't want to say the wrong thing. So he waited. Sophie took a breath and looked directly at him. "But I also felt something when you told me the truth," she said. "It mattered. I've never had someone be honest with me without trying to control me." Daniel felt his throat tighten. That was the moment he realized how much she needed honesty more than romance. She needed someone who respected her boundaries. She needed someone who could handle her silence without punishing her for it. "I'm not perfect," Daniel said. "I don't know if I can be everything you need, but I want to try." Sophie nodded slowly. "I don't know what I want either," she admitted, "but I know I don't want to ignore you anymore." Daniel felt a small wave of hope rise inside him. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a step. They walked together along the waterfront, talking about small things again, letting the silence sit between them without fear. The air felt lighter. Daniel could feel Sophie's walls slowly moving. He didn't push. He didn't rush. He just stayed close. A few days later, Sophie sent him a message asking if he wanted to join her at a local art show. Daniel didn't hesitate. He said yes immediately, and he felt a happiness he hadn't felt in months. At the show, Sophie seemed more relaxed. She smiled more, and Daniel noticed she looked at him with less fear. They talked about the paintings, the colors, the stories behind them. It felt like they were becoming more than just two people trying to be brave. But Daniel still felt nervous. He knew the truth had opened a door, but he didn't know if it would stay open. He wanted to protect what they were building. He didn't want to say or do anything that would make Sophie retreat. One night, after they had been spending more time together, Sophie invited Daniel to a quiet dinner. They sat across from each other in a small restaurant, soft music playing in the background. Daniel felt the moment was important, but he didn't know if it was the right time to speak again. He didn't want to overwhelm her. So he asked simple questions, listened carefully, and let her speak. When the dinner ended, Sophie walked Daniel to his car. She stopped for a moment and looked at him with a serious expression. "I'm not ready to say yes," she admitted. "But I'm not ready to say no either." Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of her honesty. I just need to know you're not going to disappear, she added. Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. I won't, he promised. As he drove home that night, Daniel felt a mix of relief and fear. He knew the road ahead was still uncertain, but he also knew something else. Sophie's honesty meant she was willing to try. That was more than he had hoped for. Back at his apartment, he called Emily and told her everything. Emily listened quietly, then said, "You did the right thing. You didn't rush her. You didn't chase her. You respected her." Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of his fear lifting. What if she never says yes? He asked. Emily replied, "Then you still win because you learned to love without forcing it." And in that moment, Daniel realized the truth wasn't only about Sophie. It was about himself too. He had been afraid of love because he didn't want to be hurt. But he was learning that love was worth the risk, even if the outcome wasn't guaranteed. The story didn't end with a clear answer yet. But Daniel understood something deeper now. He had done what mattered most. He had been honest, respectful, and brave. And sometimes that was enough to change a life.